maybe somebody can get away. They're making the right rotation to run away, and he's got the Frozen Tempest down. And then all of a sudden, a wild cow shows out from nowhere and just throws him back right into the team. But the siege damage for Battery was slightly higher too, and we know that yesterday when Even and Death played Gale Force, they weren't afraid to run the solo Leoric Warrior on Tomb of the Spider Queen, and he was trying to make sure that he was still split soaking. So it might just be too that the way that he approaches the warrior role, he being Battery, is a little bit different. We even saw that in the last game, allowing what you would probably consider the primary warrior, the ones with the crowd control, the control over the fights, to be played by Homicidal, and he was playing Chen.
And even beyond that, the build was a little bit, I won't say unconventional for Chen's, because he does technically, I think, have 3 mainstream builds, and he's such a rare pick that you get a little bit of everyone. But I mean, going into the old school Donkey Kong build into that game was something that we don't often see anymore. It's more
Wandering Keg.
Yeah, and so we do see some attempt of innovation coming out from Battery in the role itself.
Well, game number 1's in the bag. We're ready for game number 2. Having lost the last game, Even and Death has chosen Battleground pick, and they are taking us to Infernal Shrines.
Am I crazy in thinking that this feels a little bit weird that we're going to Infernal Shrines for the first game between them? At first glance, I would be like, all right, 2. But am I wild off that?
Do you mean for Even and Death to choose
yeah,
as their
to go
first
to Shrines
map?
as the first map selection coming out from them? To not be a small map stands out to me.
Maybe we've got a strategy coming in, Dread.
All right, so if that is the case, other than Kerrigan, what is it? Can you think of anything off the top of your head?
It's going to be SpaceStation.
I mean, yeah,
Equinox.
you're probably right. I just think of, when I think of Shrines, Kerrigan's the only thing that comes to mind, and Kerrigan's not even cheese, let's be honest. She is just a niche strategy.
Awesome. That's what you're going to say, right?
Yeah, I didn't say those other words. That's my bad.
Let's see what it's going to be. Infernal Shrines, game number 2, with SpaceStation Gaming having a 1-game advantage in this best of 5.
Tassadar is probably going to be in the ban section here. Even though it isn't a map where he stands out too heavily, the synergies with other heroes are something to be afraid of. A Chromie, though, for SpaceStation Gaming. Chromie has been insanely respected, not only for Frozen X and Even in Death in their performance on it, but all of NA has a far bigger interest. Even we heard it in the interview from K1 Pro.
Exactly.
He's like, we think we undervalue the Chromie because everybody's busting that thing out here.
Well, Frozen X did make a case for it versus Gale Force on Tomb yesterday. It was the closest game. I think it was a 24-minute game before Gale Force could close it out. SpaceStation's like, yeah, well, we're good. We're good on the Chromie.
So with Ariel removed, do we still see the Tassadar coming out from them as a first pick? It does provide a lot onto the Shrine itself. It's pretty decent. It's just a generic that has been the go-to for a while. With Ariel off the table, I wouldn't be surprised if that's where SpaceStation goes. But if they fail to do so, what are the other things they've got to be concentrating on? Abathur is a huge tool on a map like Infernal Shrines because the map naturally goes so slow, which we know Abathur struggles in the early game. I think last game was a prime example of displaying that one. And so they disagree, though. They're going to go into the Tassadar.
The combo returns, this time in the hands of Even in Death. All yesterday, day before, if Roll20 could get their hands on Garrosh Uther in this particular rotation of the draft, they would. The Uther provides solid follow-up after the toss of Garrosh, and especially nice because since he can choose the location of where it's going to go, he has that point-and-click stun just to make sure that you can land it. But there were a lot of throws or pulls with Groundbreaker that didn't connect yesterday for Even in Death, so I'm hoping that this will be a different story.
One thing we do see on the side of SpaceStation kind of deal with the Garrosh is at least percentile damage coming out with that Gray Mane having the Cursed Bullet opportunity. I was wondering if SpaceStation Gaming in that window would have felt comfortable picking a high tracer with a Task Tracer, even into the Garrosh, relying on the 10% spike at the 10, and then just be like, well, our post bomb will always get the kill still into a Garrosh.
But then the poke damage otherwise?
I know, it's pretty bad. I'm just coming up with theories here. We've been trying to figure out what is the math problem that is Garrosh and how do we solve it.
See, the Greymane at least gets Alpha Killer at 16, so then he still has the percent damage even past the initial burst that you have, so you can Cursed Bullet, and then you're still getting the auto attacks. The problem is, you gotta be in Worgen form to get that, and where does that place you? In line for a toss. So we're gonna have to see Equinox make sure that he's playing that very well. Why would you ban that?
Yep.
They don't want to. Okay, they don't want to deal with Into the Fray Tormented Souls. I can respect it if they don't think that they would be able to get it. Homicidal, it's one of his top heroes.
It just shows that I don't think it's so much of a why do you ban it, because you are right. That is the thought process here for SpaceStation Gaming. It's more of a then you are pretty much saying, I absolutely know the answer and Malthael's not a part of it, which currently, as it's shown, Malthael has looked the best into the Garrosh.
Maybe they think they won't get him because Even in Death is the next 2 picks.
I mean,
they could have just easily taken it.
Exactly, which is why they're like, you know, we don't want to deal with it. I'm just saying overall, like, why it seems so weird is like, that is the best answer we have seen so far here to be able to deal with that. But also, we know that Garrosh has to hit the flips. We've seen those that hit and those who don't, and at the end of the day, much like Stitches, it turns out if you're unable to use part of your kit, you just flat can't play the hero, and you aren't going to get the value you need to win the game.
A lot of crowd control to follow up, though, if they can hit those pull tosses. It's almost like Protoss. They've got Gravity Labs, Hammer of Justice, Drags. So many ways of keeping someone who is in the middle of Even in Death sitting right in that position.
So what does SpaceStation Gaming do now? They have the Tassadar. Greymane Tassadar has a little bit of soft synergy. Rhaegar with great shrine control, wave clear across the board. Their draft is literally as generic as it can get. So these last 2 picks can get a little wild, still be really well-rounded. I just don't know if anything stands out as the must-have that I would like to see, other than
an Escape Warrior.
I want Tychus. I just really want to see more Tychus.
Me too.
Now that Garrosh is out.
It's Shrines.
Arthas, okay.
This one not the Escape Warrior I was thinking of, but he can just turn on Army of the Dead. They're going to do it.
They're going for it.
They can turn on Army of the Dead, drop Frozen Tempest, and it's go time. Kerrigan jumps in, Greymane jumps in.
I'm a little bit scared, Gilly.
All right.
I respect your enthusiasm, but I'm shaking in my boots here. Even in Death, their last pick should be concentrated now that they see the Kerrigan on not being effective during the first 2 shrines and concentrate a bit more passive on global play. You know, worry about the macro, get some advantages through that because she's going to dominate the shrine. Arthas will make sure your whole team's dead behind it. You just don't win those early skirmishes outside of considering a colossal misplay. So you make up for it between a Dahaka and what? And
you found a Tychus!
I'm tilted. I was on the wrong side of the battlefield, boys.
Man, Arthas Kerrigan is such an old school, scary early game damage composition. The Tychus is there to burn down health bar of Arthas.
Never forget Double Envenom. That's what I think of when I think of the 2 all the time.
Yeah.
It's like level 4 hits, you're dead, boys. Double Envenom, anybody's going down. Nobody survives. But all right, so what do you got to say? You got any?
I want to see Tychus versus Garrosh too. So I was a little bit bummed that we didn't have the Tychus there, but I'm pumped that we get to see Kerrigan back. It's Equinox's Kerrigan, so it's the best of the best.
I feel like Even in Death's going to struggle in the early game, and it's going to look pretty lopsided, but I don't feel like this game has to be that way. Like the last one, SpaceStation showed a little bit of aggression, and Even in Death picked a weaker early game composition. It struggled, it kind of fell apart, momentum got on one side. Game was pretty much over after, you know, about 12, 13 minutes into it. This one looks like it's going to be the exact same way, but Even in Death, because of how slow it plays and how little you actually have to, like, address your opponent at any point in time, they can play really passive. They have enough siege to get away with it, especially locking in Kel'Thas and Tychus. Their siege potential is really high. So ignore the fight, walk away from it, siege up, take the later team fight, probably around the 13-16 era, because once you get the defensives, Kerrigan's going to fall off significantly.
And Even in Death has a lot of crowd control. If they can catch people on rotations, get some counter picks against the picks that SpaceStation will be looking for, there's a possibility that it could backfire heavily against SpaceStation. So let's get into game number 2 on Infernal Shrines, with SpaceStation Gaming have a 1-0 lead in this best of 5 so far.
One thing we have yet to consider when doing the old Matharoon problem here with Garrosh is Kerrigan. Kerrigan's a hero that typically when you want to leap into the later stages after cycling a couple of auto attacks and you're looking for combo number 2, Garrosh is going to be pretty good at stopping all that immediate burst with that armor at that stage of the game. It might cause an overextension is what I'm predicting here from Equinox. Granted, again, as you put it, he's one of the best Kerrigans in North America, and he's probably got it figured out.
I think the best thing for them is to make sure, them being SpaceStation, that they are hanging out around the shrine. And when they're getting aggressive as Kerrigan, they're watching his positioning, but around the shrine too. Because as long as she could make sure that the positioning is not such that she gets thrown, there's a lot of shrine guardians. And it all just comes down to who is in the location closest to Garrosh. So they can kind of play with that in the fights, but not chasing down Garrosh when you think he's low enough to kill him, That'll be key. Yes, if the rest of the team is there and they have follow-up crowd control, if you've got a Howling Blast, you already have the slow on him, but definitely make sure that you are not all by yourself, Kerrigan, when you go in after Garrosh.
Another thing I would like to see out of SpaceStation Gaming, concentrating on how they want to approach these team fights throughout this game, is to make sure that Kerrigan's the initiator and Arthas is the flanker. And as Arthas initiates the flank is when Kerrigan focuses on the combo. It's not optimal when you're a Kerrigan because you don't typically want to combo according to what benefits your team the most, but oftentimes just even dragging them and not hitting the combo and Arthas flanking flat out means you won the team fight anyway. You drop the Maelstrom, everybody's doing the damages, suddenly your opponent's dead.
There's a couple of good wave clear heroes. I really like the setup for SpaceStation so that they can still allow for Kerrigan to rotate around and look for picks. They have good wave clear heroes. Talking Trees in the bottom has a lot of escape for something like that to happen in the 4-man between mid and bot of Even and Death. They have Arthas to try to do his best to soak up the shots of the minions and kill them with the Frozen Tempest. Kerrigan's going in, ravages to the tower, gets a pull on Lutano. He stays alive.
He's able to keep himself alive. Tiger ate a bit of shots, but at the end of the day, everything is A-okay for either side here. Even in Death looking to rebuttal a bit through the mid lane with their dominant wave clear. They've been unable to necessarily drain the turrets as effectively as you would assume with this kind of 4-man lethality. Hold on. Equinox is here, gets the drag, gets the combo. Gravity Lapse thrown up as a deterrent, but Battery has no way out of this. The armor coming out from How, but that is going to be first blood for SpaceStation Gaming.
They get the kill on Garrosh just as the Shrine is activating. 12 seconds without Garrosh. Even in Death need to figure out what they're going to do to retaliate. They head down to the bottom lane to push along with that. That'll help them catch up in talent tiers and make sure they get 4. But with Kerrigan already jumping around on top of all of these skeletal defenders, they're going to forfeit the Shrine and just try to push this lane as hard as they can.
This is exactly what I was talking about in the draft. Not concentrating on initiating on those Shrines is going to be absolutely key. But to ignore the first Shrine, that is a common strat, whether or not you win or lose the Shrine in general. So now my question is, as the game moves forward, what is the thought process here for Even in Death? Brushtalk comes in, though. There is Homicidal hitting himself a drag. Jason not wanting anything to do with it. The Dark Swarm and the 3-man Howling Blast is the thing that lets Casanova survive. This guy is just slowly becoming one of my favorite warriors in the North American scene. That is...
He is stellar.
Interstellar. Get it? I'm sorry.
I already made the joke, and then you just made the joke again.
I know. I nailed it. I almost said you don't understand the gravity of the situation, but I felt like that was a bit of a stretch. You know, at this point, how much can we say about SpaceStation Gaming other than they're out of this world?
So that's Supernova already.
Is that?
So we'll think about it. You know, we've got some more up our sleeves. Don't you worry, chat. SpaceStation. A little bit ahead of Even in Death. I just got hit by a pin for some reason.
I'm sorry. I'm just enjoying myself over here, just having a good time. At the end of the day, SpaceStation, with their half-level lead, is something that you can be proud of, but you shouldn't be writing home about. At this point, you have an early game composition. You have the Deathfall early on. We should assume that a half-level, even as far as 3/4, is relevant or expected-ish for SpaceStation Gaming. It's if it gets farther than that, Even in Death might have to second-guess the decision-making that they have made. It's a 5-man class for SpaceStation, whereas it's only a 4. Dahaka's still getting the side soak here for Even in Death. That's giving them a pretty significant advantage. If this continues as a trend, that's really going to actually hurt SpaceStation Gaming because they don't have the best siege. They have really good damage output, but Greyman's the only one who's effective at taking out those turrets.
I like to see Even in Death just not overcommitting to the defense of that fort because it has let them catch back up somewhat in experience. Dahaka stayed up in the top, pushed that lane, sending Greymane up there. SpaceStation, again, with some good murking heroes, are going to make sure that they have their Shaman timed in conjunction with the next Shrine phase. And otherwise, SpaceStation staying safe as Even in Death once again fires up their 4-man rotation between mid-bot.
SpaceStation Gaming, though, making stuff happen and elsewhere on the map with that invade. Going to be denying the Shaman camp, which, with the positioning of the Shrine, is surprisingly impactful. Now, there is no counterplay that if somehow we find ourselves into a window where this gets slow played out to 10 mark, suddenly Even in Death can't go the, oh, we'll take the Shaman, get the split pressure, we have Dahaka, no global to respond to. They just flat lost the strongest mercenary in the game. Does give them a time advantage on starting this Shrine, though.
It does, but not that much when you're up against a Kerrigan, which is what I was just thinking.
Lutano falling pretty low after that drag combo. Battery is also equally low, but unable to get the reset.
Casanova slows on both Frozen X, but nobody touching Lutano, and he gets away. Combo comes in. Battery lives through all the armor until the very last tick of the Psionic Storm brings him down at the height of the Shrine phase. And Superstars, SpaceStation will get right back on top of the Shrine.
And we have to take a minute to look at when we were talking about how passive is Even in Death going to play. I talked about the first Shrine. Even if you don't have the dominant comp, sometimes it's accepted to be able to give that up here. But even over the second one, because of the loss of the camp up on top, Even in Death felt panicked, needing to force that up. Not understanding SpaceStation's rotation was honestly far faster than they were assuming.
SpaceStation holding out on the Shrine.
Perfect.
They have 39 out of 40 until they can get heroic abilities and make this push all the stronger. Gonna push out the lanes too. Hopes that maybe they will be able to force Even Death to either rotate away or miss out on some of the experience and get further behind.
It's actually really important how long they wait on this. So if they had immediately capped it when Kerrigan backed, for instance, you're like, okay, well, you don't normally want to start a 5 versus 4 or anything else. But when you think about why the comp's so scary, it's actually because of Kerrigan's consistently following up onto the Punisher. So if they were like, we'll take the 4 versus 5, Kerrigan's the sole reason, like, you want that hero to be able to be there, accenting your early game and make stuff happen. I am surprised, though, with the advantage that SpaceStation achieved in the composition that they have, that they weren't willing to take the risk into Syndra. I thought we might see ourselves, you know, an early Syndra, just take it with the Punisher. We have a full level lead. We can get ourselves a keep.
Lots of throwing and jumping happened there, but in the end, nobody died. Battery got very low. The Punisher's there. Ancestral Healing will keep Jason alive.
Heroics are going to be here for Even in Death.
There is no Cursed Bullet. Giant combination into Maelstrom. That'll be the end of Battery this time. Equinox gets stunned, and there's a couple of gravity laps there. Frozen X doing his very best to deal the damage necessary as the rest of SpaceStation are sieging. Kael'thas and Kerrigan trade out in the kills. Dragged from Homicidal, but Casanova's right there.
Drops Isolation.
Save. Isolation takes out Jason.
And he ends up getting the kill. The slow from Lutano is going to connect to Casanova, but SpaceStation Gaming wants this keep. Tiger JK is going to be the noble sacrifice, and it's the only one necessary. Keep down again at the 7-minute mark for SpaceStation Gaming, an entire level lead at this point in time. Even in Death has got to find a way to slow things down. The positive silver lining here is the fact that Kerrigan naturally, she doesn't like mathematically fall off, but in terms of like how she plays out mixed with the options and diversity to stop the momentum and things she likes to do in a team fight do fall off as the game moves on. And once that 13-16 hits up, I expect Benediction and the double healing of Even in Death to be able to support the members. Suddenly, Equinox won't be as intimidating.
Level 13's almost here for SpaceStation. Even in Death sieging the first fort. This bottom lane has been a place where they've been constantly trying to do damage and take out some of the structures of SpaceStation. But Casanova comes in with a flank. Immediately, Warlord's challenge taunted, pulled back in, but staying alive thanks to the little bit of armor that he could give himself, the Army of the Dead.
Equinox is coming in trying to cause havoc there, but unable to get the reset. Combo goes on to Lutano. Battery's going to drop here. Frozen X is now the focus fire. Maelstrom used, but the gravity lapse is it. They get the kill 2 for 2 on both ends, but now Even in Death look like they are the ones on full retreat. Odin is going to drop. Divine Shield as well. Not maybe the communication you would want at this stage in time. Even in Death loses Homicidal and walks away down 3 members.
My apologies, that armor was from trees trying to keep Arthas alive as long as he could. But the trade, 2 for 3, benefiting SpaceStation. And largely because they still had their supports up, they could continue the fighting. And Tiger JK, as a support, still does a reasonable amount of damage as Rhaegar. So they will take all the mercenary camps, paint the battleground blue, and start to head up to the Shrine with their Kerrigan.
They have a double catapult on bottom, and the camp's going to be pressuring double through mid. At the positioning of that camp, Dahaka immediately has got to be the first to respond. So suddenly that 13 Talontier window is going to be lost pretty heavily here, as long as SpaceStation Gaming sends Kerrigan to start the Shrine as soon as possible. Because when we don't often highlight where the catapults are lined up when the objectives spawn, it matters in terms of the relevance of when Dahaka has to come up and answer, which is why we see the force here coming out from the members of SpaceStation Gaming. Casanova's able to keep himself alive. Equinox has done nothing to even join in, comes in with the leap, gets the combo, and Battery's the focus. Gravity Lapse is used, beautiful cleanse from Tiger, and Homicidal now with that brush top.
He had the double up, which has given Battery the extra armor, plus the armor, of course, from Uther. So Battery this time, now with 13, better able to deal with the damage output and all of the crowd control. But you could see Casanova sends in a Howling Blast that forces him to be able to get out, and then he uses his Indomitable as a way of that self-cleanse, the 1.5 seconds of unstoppable. But then after that, still, Equinox can come in and follow up with a combo. Using Eviscerate, getting on top of Frozen X, now the Maelstrom on multiple members, combo and Kael'thas down, and a lot of members about to fall if they can't get back to this fort.
Drag comes out onto trees, but I don't know if it's gonna matter. He drops the Dimensional Shift, gets the Ancestral Healing, and even though Tiger JK may be brought to the wrong side of the table there, at the end of the day, 2 members are lost for Even in Death, and SpaceStation Gaming is ready to find themselves another Punisher. They're gonna be closing in on the 16 talent tier, 3 catapults on bottom, 2 camps throughout mid. It is just falling apart here for Even in Death. We may have a very quick game on our hands here, Gilly.
Yeah, it is stifling the amount of pressure that SpaceStation have been able to put on from the beginning, thanks to their very good rotations and getting an early game lead for a second time in a row in this series. They take down the fort so that the Punisher can get a lot more damage, even going after the Shaman camp along the way. They want to make the most out of this 16 and double level advantage.
So who is going to be the individual who gets the bait over the wall? Because none of those are very mobile, and none of them are really necessarily the best to make it happen. It looks like Battery's the chosen one. Combo comes out over the wall, gonna set him down to 50%. Howling Blast is used to cleanse his force, but that is Garrosh going down, exactly what I was talking about. This is SpaceStation Gaming ripping it up. Kerrigan leaping, comboing. I mean, what else is there to say other than Even in Death is wishing they had Even in Death at this point in time.
I don't know if Even in Death would even be enough at this point to save them.
You're
11
right.
kills to 5. The last one was 16 kills to 1. It was a closer game. The last game was a 5-level lead, and this one was a 3. But SpaceStation looks so dominant. And frankly, it is awesome to see that dominance after the amount of work they put in on the break, after not being able to qualify for the Western Clash. They boot camped just because they know how important this part of Phase 2 is. We're talking about being able to qualify for HGC finals at BlizzCon. They lost to Lag Force, but they maintained their composure, and now they're up 2 games over Even in Death.
Even in Death may have to start considering, you know, composition timing strengths here. That's the 2nd game in a row they have been unable to even pick up 16 talent tier. Suddenly, we have to concern more about the early game, not picking those later, slower strategies. Because, I mean, if you're the underdog, playing aggressive compositions, in theory, are always going to be better for you because you're stronger at the beginning where there's the least amount of mistakes possible. And if you're the worst team, you're going to make more than your opponents. And I feel like it's being brought on display. It's even worsened by the fact SpaceStation's picking the aggressive compositions early on. It's just kind of like each mistake is just exponentially more severe than the one before, it feels like. So I hope to see in the next game, at least Even in Death, draft something more offensive in the early stages.
Well, they're going to have a minute to try to figure it out. We're going to go to a break. When we will come back, we'll have game number 3. Stick with us.
Though he grew up ashamed of his father for drinking Manaroth's blood, Garrosh Hellscream was filled with fierce pride when he learned of Gromash's heroic sacrifice. After joining the Horde, Garrosh quickly rose to become the commander of its forces in Northrend, and eventually Thrall's successor as war chief. His hatred for the Alliance is unrivaled, and he wants nothing more than to crush them into dust. Now, the Nexus trembles as Garrosh's war song echoes across the realms. Garrosh is a resilient and relentless warrior who uses brute strength to crush the will of his opponents. Garrosh's trait is Armor Up. As he takes damage, his armor increases in proportion to how much health he is missing. The lower Garrosh's health, the less damage he suffers from enemy attacks. Groundbreaker is Garrosh's first basic ability. He slams the ground with his axe and creates a shockwave that damages all enemies in its area of effect. Enemy heroes at the edge of Groundbreaker's damage zone are pulled toward Garrosh on impact. Bloodthirst is Garrosh's primary method of sustain. With a quick swipe of his axe, Garrosh deals damage to an enemy and heals himself for a percentage of his missing health. Bloodthirst's heal is doubled if used on an enemy hero. Wrecking Ball provides Garrosh with a powerful repositioning tool. When activated, Garrosh picks up the nearest enemy and throws them to a target location, damaging and slowing all enemies in the area. Garrosh's first heroic ability is Warlord's Challenge.